Genau. Wir haben einen gemeinsamen Freund. Also ich möchte ihn natürlich als Freund
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this side event of the Munich Security Conference 2023. We are happy that you made it, despite some hampering factors like demonstrations and closure of roads. So, thank you for joining us tonight. And just by way of introduction, my name is Joachim Sanden. I'm the Vice President of Security Matters of the Association of Reservists of the German Bundeswehr. It's a great privilege and honor to be partner of the MSC and to have the opportunity to host this event today or tonight. Before I start, just a couple of administrative remarks. It is of note that this event will be recorded and the record is accessible via Facebook. That means afterwards, after the end of this side event, you can have another look by accessing Facebook, and it's not necessary to have a Facebook account. It just goes through normal computer operations. This year, we are all aware of the fact that since last year's conference, there was a turning point in history, and a fundamental change in security policy matters has happened. We were all shocked by the unprecedented Russian invasion of Ukraine, by the severe violation of international law, and by the return of war to Europe because of aggressive actions taken by a nation being a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Consequently, the war in Ukraine is the overarching topic of this conference, and the war has an impact on a broad variety of topics. Tonight, we would like to discuss the following topic: Hotspot Baltic Sea on the strategic dimension of the maritime NATO eastern flank. The turning point in history may also comprise the possibility that the Russian hegemonic position may be extended to the Baltic states and to the Baltic Sea. The possibility has generated the request of Norway and Finland to join NATO. With this respect, some voices call the Baltic Sea no longer a sea of NATO's eastern flank. They call it a sea surrounded or almost surrounded by NATO nations. Ladies and gentlemen, we are more than happy that experts joined our side event in order to discuss the subject topics. First of all, His Excellency Hanno Pevkur, Minister of Defense of Estonia. He is being a member of parliament since 2007, and he held a variety of positions in the government. For instance, he took office as Minister of Social Affairs in 2009. In 2017, he changed to Minister of Justice. In 2016, he went back to the parliament as a normal member of parliament. And in 2022, he took office as Minister of Defense. Your Excellency, we are very happy that you are here tonight in order to, well, discuss with us and that we learn from your views on the topic. Thank you very much. Secondly, His Excellency Mikko Savola from Finland. Being a member of parliament since 2011, he served in different commissions, for instance, in the Defense Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, and on the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. He was appointed as Interim Minister of Defense by 5th January this year, because Minister Kaikkonen went on paternal leave. That's not a normal issue for ministers. However, it's a good thing. And even better, that you joined tonight and that we learn from your broad experience on parliamentary issues. Thank you very much. Turning to military experts, I'd like to welcome Rear Admiral Sascha Helge Rackwitz. He is Director of Center of Excellence for Operations in Confined and Shallow Waters, and also Commander of Flotilla 1 at Kiel. Just a couple of words on the Center of Excellence. A couple of nations, for instance, Hellenic Republic, Kingdom of Netherlands, and Republic of Turkey, and also Republic of Poland and Republic of Italy, joined as sponsoring nations to the Center of Excellence, and also the United States, the Kingdom of Denmark, and the Republic of Lithuania provide and contribute to the Center of Excellence. Welcome, Rear Admiral Rackwitz. Thank you for joining us tonight. What having a discussion without an expert? a historian. So, Professor Dr. Sönke Neitzel, he holds the chair of war studies. In the past, there was a different expression, I think.
What was the English translation, yeah? Because Militärgeschichte, Kulturgeschichte der Gewalt is so too complicated for English speakers, so therefore war studies is understandable.
So it's at the University of Potsdam, and you hold this since 2015. And following your doctorate at your alma mater, the University of Mainz, you stayed there for a couple of years as university lecturer, and then you moved on to a chair of modern history and global security at University of Glasgow, and followed by a 3 years tour as chair of international history at the London School of Economics and Political Science. So that is the scientist's view on the topic we would like to discuss. Thank you very much for joining again our community. Thank you. And finally, last but not least, if you count numbers on the podium, you recognize there's one missing, and that is Reserve Colonel Professor Dr. Patrick Sensburg. He's the president of the Association of Reservists of the German Bundeswehr, and he will be the moderator of this side event. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Joachim. Welcome everybody here to our panel, to our excellent panel, I think. Last year we had an excellent panel, a full house, a very interesting discussion. And now, Joachim Sanden already pointed it out, in a different time, with a new time after the war in Ukraine started about 1 year ago. So we're discussing now another very interesting and interesting topic for many, many people. The Baltic Sea region with excellent people on the stage. And before I go directly to the topic, let me ask you one question before I go in this issue. If Finland is on the panel, Minister, what about NATO membership? How far are we? Is the Munich Security Conference helping to make a decision? Did you had interesting speeches with colleagues from other NATO countries? You can expect who I mean. So, do we have any news?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we are close, but not yet in. But we are very happy that 28 countries out of 30 has already ratified us. Since the last year, when was that Madrid meeting in a NATO, so this ratification round has gone quite fast inside the NATO. But there are 2 countries left, Hungary and Turkey. We know that all that they have, their decision making has taken a little longer. Hungary is probably moving on the next month. What the Minister of Defense. When I was discussing with him in Brussels 2 days ago, and in Turkey, we don't know when they will move. Hopefully soon, but it's very good to hear that all the NATO countries in those 28 countries are supporting us and pushing us forwards NATO and. I really hope that Finland and Sweden will be members before Vilnius meeting this summer. But in Finland we are not afraid. We have a strong defense. We have a common conscription trained army and so on. So and we have been partners of NATO for the last 30 years, almost 30 years, and we are preparing to be ready from the day number 1. When the application is approved.
Thank you very much. And I'm just coming this morning from Budapest, and you can be sure that your NATO friends supporting your membership. And we had the discussion in the MOD also about this issue, and you have lots of support. And you mentioned conscription. We didn't mention yet that you were also president of the Reserve Association in Finland before, right?
Yeah, I was. I'm the former president of the Reservist Association for years in 2013, 2016.
So that gives me the chance later on to come on the issues what role reserve is playing. But let's come to our topic. So the question that goes to both of you, to both ministers, what role is the maritime component playing in civil defense in your countries? So I see you both have army, you have reservists, but what about the maritime component? How important is it? Who will start?
I can start if you.
We talked about codes before, so
we don't have to talk about Estonian membership in NATO. So it's
that's at least that's for sure.
So first of all, thank you very much for having me. And considering the panel, I will just raise the importance of the reserve army, because in NATO, two of the countries, Estonia and Finland, share the same understanding of the defense. We have the reserve army, so which means that we are preparing the conscripts, and then we have the reserve army based on the reservists, and this is why it is very, very important. And we have also the same ugly big neighbor who doesn't respect any international law and doesn't respect the rule of law. And this makes the situation for us extremely difficult. And as we see also at the moment in Ukraine, so the situation is obviously out of the hands. And it's difficult for me to understand why such a country is a member of UN Security Council as a permanent member. So someone who commits crimes constantly against humanity, against any normal law what you have. Doesn't matter is it war law or not. What is important regarding the Baltic Sea and civilian understanding of that. So Baltic Sea is definitely as a Suwalki Cup. When we take the new situation where I already consider Finland and Sweden as members of NATO, so I'm not looking at that they are not members of NATO. They are all together with us behind the tables of NATO and within all the discussions. So what happens officially and also juridically that joining when Finland and Sweden will join NATO is that Baltic Sea will be the inner sea of NATO. And I would rather like to think that we should not be afraid how Russia is controlling the A2AD, but rather how we are controlling A2AD. Because just theoretically, just imagine Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Sweden, Denmark, Poland, we can close the Baltic Sea and we can control everything. So we can close Kaliningrad and we can close St. Petersburg if there is a need for that. And I believe this is one of the reasons why Russia is pushing so heavily also against Finland, against Sweden, not to joining NATO, because they understand the consequence of that. I've been speaking to my child so many times that we don't have the luxury to give any meter of our land, and that means also that we don't have the luxury to give any meter of our sea. So we have to control it from the first moment on, and for that we are building our capacities. We are buying the new capabilities for that, and this is what we have to do. Because when also in the Ukraine war, what we have to understand that there is no silver medal in a war for the runner-up. So there is only a winner. And now just to close my opening remark, this is why I truly believe that the unified regional maritime component control has to be settled. Will it be led by Germany or Sweden or Poland? I know that Germany took the initiative. I support that. But doesn't matter who will take the lead. But the point is that we will have to have a joint maritime component control center, and with that we have to rephrase also the understanding of the land component and JFC command or joint forces command of the land component, which means that at the moment we have Norfolk and Brunssum, and when we have this joint command for the maritime, one of the options is that okay, we will have one control on the Baltic Sea, and then we have land component led by Brunssum or Norfolk or both of them, or we form something new with the JEF countries, which is then or the Nordic Baltic 8. So we can discuss it, but the point is that I don't want to see that Baltic Sea region will be divided inside of NATO, and especially on the Baltic Sea.
Thank you. Very clear statement. Can I quick go to Admiral Rackwitz for
sure.
one question? Minister said we can close the Baltic Sea. Do we have the capability? You are with your flotilla in that area. Can we really do this? Or is it a target on the horizon? Can you do?
Close the Baltic Sea. Well, first of all, I would start perfectly evading the question from a tactical point of view. I would argue that closing something is not a maritime tactical term. So this is a understanding which is rather land-focused. Navies don't think of that. What we think of is controlling the Baltic Sea. Can we conduct sea control in the Baltic Sea? Yes, I think we can. I think we can already now. However, by virtue of course, the Oblast Kaliningrad, of course, that island on the Baltic Sea coast, Russia has a lot of capacity of mischief making in the meantime, and we have to confront this. So control at sea is never a fixed status as it might be on land. It is always a very fluid, a very dynamic condition in which you always have to constantly fight any power which might dispute your control. But first of all, I would like to widen the view on the Baltic Sea, and I think the recent months have made that perfectly clear. What navies all around Northern Europe have argued for years. The Baltic Sea has to be seen in the wider understanding of the sea lines of communication all across the Atlantic. So when we look at the Baltic Sea, and this is how the German Navy understands our role within NATO, we really have to understand it, which is beginning in the Chesapeake Bay and goes all across the Northern Atlantic, through the Guyuk, alongside the British Isles, and then through the Danish Straits and all the way through the Baltic Sea in order to reach our partners and allies on the Baltic states, and in future the allies in Finland and Sweden, because they depend on the openness of those sea lines of communication. So just to focus on the Baltic Sea would be the first mistake. In order to keep those sea lines of communication open, the Minister is perfectly right, we have to be able to conduct control operations 365, 24/7, starting today. And this is the specific challenge. On the one hand, it is true that you always have to think military capacity from the high end, from the combat situation. So what do you need in the combat situation? At the same time, only to think of defense is actually not enough. You have to think about deterrence, and deterrence then again fashions your capacity you need for defense in a totally different way. Because the resilience, the sustainment of that combat potential that you have to build up gives it a whole different flavor. And we have to build on that. And I perfectly agree with the Minister when he says we need the command and control structure to do that. And no matter where we end with, I would not like to discuss who does what and where is the headquarters. Those are subordinate questions we can resolve later on. But what we do understand is there cannot be any border, any delimitation of control which is going through the Baltic Sea. That would be disastrous. And there could not be, at the same time, be such a delimitation on the coast of the Baltic Sea. Because the Baltic Sea, and again I agree with what Finland and Estonia said, the Baltic Sea is the strategic depth of the landmass of the Baltic states. So you have to always see that as a unity. So putting a C2 line through that would be detrimental to our success.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, if I may add a little bit, I totally agree what my great colleague Hanno said, but but we are not yet members. We are partners, so it's a difference to be the members, and when we are members, and now we actually accepted that action plan in that political guide action plan in a NATO defense minister meeting 2 days ago. But after that, we are part of the political planning and the operational planning on the Baltic Sea, and we have a lot of capability in Finland, and we are investing now to the new ships on the Navy a lot, and the Sweden, they have a lot of capability under the sea. So I think we can make this even more stronger to defend the Baltic Sea when we are in the club. So there is a difference to be the partner and difference to be inside the club, and I think the future security in the Baltic Sea will be stronger when we are members. We are security providers, both Finland and Sweden.
Thank you very much. And before I come to deterrence and resilience, I want to have a look into the region and the role the region plays historically and now also, of course. Why is it so important to look in this region, to look in the Baltic Sea region? Not just in the Baltic Sea region, but of course also in the Baltic Sea region. Professor Neitzel.
I mean, speaking historically, we can say, well, in the 18th century, obviously this was a pivot of major wars when Sweden was still a great power, the Great Nordic War, and the Baltic Sea was really a theatre of war which was quite important. Obviously, after the downfall of Sweden as a great power, it was only a second theatre of war in major wars, in First World, Second World War, and possibly also in the Cold War. But we shouldn't forget, in the Cold War, it was very much the German-Danish Navy, a defensive deployment, because there was a massive threat from the Rotbannerflotte, and the German Navy had massive problems in coping with that. And there was a clear danger of landing operations in the German coast. I think nowadays, I mean, it's obvious that 2014, everything has changed, and I think there was a NATO awareness, and they were totally surprised about this kind of step taken by Russia. And then there was an awareness, oh, damn, we are not able to defend the Baltic states, and Suwalki, etc. And then Kaliningrad, with all this development of the Russian fleet. And obviously, I mean, it was a very weak situation, and I still remember Ben Hodges saying, "Oh, when I would be a German chancellor, I would be a bit worried about my troops in Lithuania because you can't supply them." And then, so therefore, I think now with the incoming of Finland and Sweden, everything has changed now, and this is a much better situation. But we see that Russia also learned from the wars in Yugoslavia and Iraq, and they developed, you know, this A2AD capabilities. They really learned how NATO acts, that they are very much about area superiority, etc., etc., etc. So they are very much capabilities in Kaliningrad area. I mean, that's, I think, is a major strategic shift with Sweden and Finland coming in. But still, I mean, it's what you said. It's the hinterland of the defense of the Baltic states, and we should not forget. Also, from a historical point of view, I'm a military historian. We have seen this importance of the Baltic states. It was the first amphibious operation of the German Navy with the German Army in the Baltic Islands in 1917. It was Germany had a massive focus on the Baltic in the Second World War. It was a training center of the German Navy, of the submarine arm. They tried to do everything to defend the Baltic Sea. And again, in the Cold War, it was a focus and possibly the weakest point of German defense. So therefore, I mean, it is important. I mean, I wouldn't say that this is the center of NATO defense or of warfare in the last 200 years. Obviously, it's not. But still, it's quite important, especially because it's now in all dimensions which come together, and where we can really, hopefully, succeed in having really joint operations.
But true, for giving these countries security, for giving each other of us security, I can understand this. But isn't it not just about Kaliningrad?
Well. Well,
I try to be provoked.
Yeah, of course.
I know.
Well, it is about Kaliningrad, but still.
And the fleet, of course,
and of course, the big question is what scenarios are we discussing? And very much depends on the situation in Belarus. If Belarus turns more towards Russia, it's a base for Russia to attack the Baltic states, and of course then you could have to discuss what about the situation, what is the capability of Russia. Before the 24th of February last year, we thought, it's almost impossible or very difficult to defend the Baltic states. Possibly we had a much too positive reading of the capabilities of Russia. So we learned more that there are massive problems of Russia, and it's in its geographical situation, it's just very difficult. And so therefore we need the kind of supply line. We need what will they do with Bornholm and Gotland? What are these kind of plans? And we have seen that even in the Second World War, it was not totally possible to cut off the Russian fleet in St. Petersburg or in Leningrad. So there were Soviet submarines breaking out, at least in 41 or 42, and there is a capable fleet there. So it's definitely, a focus of NATO defense, and if they have their enhanced forward presence, we must include that in the maritime dimension. And then if you look at, possibly it was not very wise for the German Navy to get rid of their E-boats, their Schnellboote, and now we have this kind of corvettes, but we have already, when you say we are ready, I always say this, we are ready. If I speak to the commanders, that's a different case.
But let me go to you, Minister Pevkor. So when I hear this, is the threat from the Russian Navy higher than from the army with tanks and everything? Is Navy more capable, and that's why we have to focus on the maritime component here? Or how do you see the situation right now?
Well, I'm very glad that we have someone who knows the history. So because, it always depends how far back you go in the history. So some claim that the Estonian Vikings were actually the most successful ones, when they went to conquer something. So, but nevertheless, we have had Swedish time and we have had German time and Danish time in Estonia, and then somehow Danes also have their flag from Estonia. But nevertheless, well. Why Baltic Sea is so important? That yes, was mentioned that we don't have this strategic depth, and just to describe that and just to set the scene, so we just have to understand that the battlefield in Ukraine at the moment means that 110,000 square kilometers of Ukraine is occupied. The territory of Estonia is 45,000 square kilometers. So 2.5 Estonia are at the moment occupied. So just take the map, that it's a small part of Ukraine, but it's like Estonia, Latvia, and almost Lithuania. So this is the size. The front line at the moment is 1,200 kilometers, a bit more. So this is either the Finnish border, you have a bit more, or just to describe it even better, from Tallinn to Krakow. Just understand, where we lie at this war. And now when we think that, when you want to control the country, so you can control the sea, but still the capital is not on the sea. So the capital is on the land. So the power is on the land. So which means that you have to control the land to control the country. And this is why the land component will still be the most important. But considering our region, when you want to have the control over the land, you have to control the sea. So this is the point. Now, when we take the Baltic Sea and then the closing the Baltic Sea, so it doesn't matter what are the correct juridical or war terms. When we take this panel today, and probably people are watching also over the web, so we all understand what we're talking about, that we are controlling the sea, and yes, we can do that if necessary. And absolutely we can do it much better when we have also Finland and Sweden. But what we sometimes do forget is that in the Baltic Sea there are critical infrastructure below the seabed. We have critical cables, internet cables from Europe to America. We have 2 energy grids from Estonia to Finland. We have 1 gas pipeline from Estonia to Finland. And we had 1 accident a couple of months ago where supposedly there was 1, I don't know, Singaporean or whatever the ship was wearing the flag, and there was a loose anchor. Just went over our cables. And we can all understand that, when we talk about the hybrid threats related to the Baltic Sea, this is one of the biggest risks we have. And this is why we have to control the full seabed, not only the surface, but also what is going on below the sea. Yes, Estonia has 1 submarine. It's still functioning, but it's in the museum.
We have the same.
Yeah, so you are all more than welcome to our maritime museum, and you can go inside of that. So built by Brits in 1936, and it was fully operational when we lifted out from the water, but nevertheless it's in the museum today. So we don't have the capacity at the moment and capabilities to control the underwater life, but we are working on that. We have to share information among each other. So Swedes, Finns have some of the information. Of course, we cannot share the information before you're not in NATO. But nevertheless, we have the capabilities. We will have more capabilities. And to control the Baltic Sea means also that, it's a part of the land component, and it's a part of undersea component and above the water component. So there is a mix of different factors we have to take into account when we want to talk about the full control of Baltic Sea and what is the importance of the Baltic Sea. So, and the final remark in this intervention, Russian capabilities. Let's be honest, Russia hasn't lost much capabilities in Ukrainian war. Yes, you all know that I cannot say so in Russian, that's right. So, go to that place where they put the Moscow to the submarine station. But nevertheless, they lost like 4 to 5 vessels. So 98% of the Russian vessels are still operational. That means nuclear submarines, that means frigates, destroyers, and all the other vessels. They are there. So which just shows us how big is the threat from the water.
Okay, thank you very much.
I can take one more question because
yes.
Finland is receiving tonight in the gala that Ewald von Kleist Prize, and President won't be happy if I'm not there.
And if you can tell us also what you expect from NATO and from Germany especially, when you're joining NATO in the maritime component, maybe that also. The floor is yours.
Yeah, we have really good cooperation with Germany in all levels. Like the Navy has really good cooperation, air forces, land forces, and so on. And I think it will go even more deeper. But what we should do more together now, what we have seen in the security of supply. And when we are thinking that we need more defense industry into the Europe and stronger defense industry in the whole country all the way, we need to make it more stronger now in the near future. We need to produce more equipments, more ammos and so on in the Europe, and we need to be more independent on that way. And that is in the land forces, that is in the navy and in the air forces as well. But Finland, when we are joining NATO, we will be active member and cooperating with all countries in the future, and it will be good for the whole NATO when that day comes when we are the members. But thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't say that in the beginning. Some of us have a meeting right now, so I think we're coming to that point later. But I have one more question concerning this. We heard the Russian fleet has a nuclear component, still capable, still possible to use it, also regional maybe. Can you tell us, Admiral, what the Russian fleet has got right now? What are we talking about? From your experience, what is there?
There, if we're talking about the Baltic Sea,
yes.
As far as I know, the nuclear component of the Russian Navy doesn't play a role in the Baltic Sea.
Okay.
It is the second strike capability is submarine based for the Russians, but this is mainly in the Northern Fleet. This is not a component of the Baltic Sea, so that does not concern us that much. Neither does actually, interestingly enough, currently a submarine force, a Russian submarine force on the Baltic Sea, which is interesting to take note of, because it tells us something about how the Russians operationally and tactically see the Baltic Sea, and this should inform how we see. And just let me build a synthesis of what I've just said, and the good professor has rightly argued that, well, if he talked to some of my commanders, they would have their second thoughts about when I say, yes, we're ready. Of course, and this is what I want to get at, we are currently not where we actually want to be in materiel and personnel readiness, and we have to come a lot farther in order to be able to, what the minister said, to be able to build up a permanent deterrence presence in the Baltic Sea 365, 24/7. And especially, as the secretary said, not only, and this is the special characteristics of the Baltics, not only above the surface, but also, and especially so, beneath the surface. The seabed, what we call seabed warfare, is becoming ever more important, especially in the Baltic Sea. If there ever was a joint operations area which would actually call for multi-domain operations, it is the Baltic Sea. So looking at focuses on land forces or naval forces or air forces doesn't get us anywhere. If we're not capable of, and this again is what we were discussing in the beginning, to control the subsurface, make sure that our lines of communication, I'm now referring to digital lines of communication, as well as the physical lines of communication are intact, and here's where we have to heavily invest now, then we have a problem. Closing Kaliningrad, closing the Gulf of Finland for Russian surface forces is actually the easier task, as contradictory it might sound. The more demanding task we have ahead of us, and we are not where we want to be, is to be able to build up a presence force in the Baltic Sea, combined presence force in the Baltic Sea around the clock, beneath the surface. We've just seen what happened to the gas pipelines and how easily they are to be manipulated, destroyed, whatever. We've seen how vulnerable we are up in the north if we look at the pipelines through the North Sea to Norway, which is pretty much the same picture. The Baltic Sea is so shallow that you actually, with mine warfare, with specialized divers, you can manipulate and threaten almost everything which is technically on the seabed in the Baltic Sea, everywhere, from the German coast to the Estonian coast into the Gulf of Finland. So this is the big challenge.
Okay, if we hear this from the historical background, how will Russia react when Finland and Sweden joins in the area Baltic Sea? Will there be a reaction strategically, not in the moment?
Obviously, we don't know.
But that's why we have you, as a professor.
Well, yeah.
You can look back into the history. You know?
Yeah, exactly. It's more the
and draw conclusions out of it.
It's more the political scientists who should foresee the future, but no, nobody can know. But what is interesting in this regard, that I think deterrence at the moment, at least for the public in Germany, works, but against us. So Putin is very successful in deterring us, and even our chancellor, took up this idea in his Spiegel interview last year, that he can't deliver any kind of combat tanks because that might be a nuclear war. So deterrence really is very different from the Cold War, where everyone was agreeing, and not depending on any party, we are not going to put under pressure, and we are having a deterrence also against Russia. So this is working against us, and there's a big fear that for weapon delivery, or Sweden and Finland joining us, and there's always an announcement of now this will have harsh consequences, and as far as we see now, nothing has happened. So if we see the escalation of war, I would argue it was not because of any kind of weapon delivery or Sweden and Finland joining, but because of the course of the war itself. That some Russian generals said, "No, we have to attack the Ukrainian infrastructure, the critical infrastructure." But this was not because of Sweden and Finland. We don't know, of course, what comes next. So where is the red line? But I mean, I'm only an external observer, but if I talk to people who know much more about nuclear deterrence than I do, I think the general reading, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the United States of America has made very clear from the very beginning, if Russia is going to use nuclear weapons, there will be a massive strike back, not necessarily a nuclear strike back, but on the cyber level, on the conventional level, and they can decap in the end the Russian forces. So to my reading, this somehow works. But it is surprisingly successful in the German public, and I'm always, approached by worried people who say, is this kind of next step, a next step to a nuclear war? And I mean, I wonder. I mean, my upbringing was in the heart of the Cold War, and the answer was very clear in this time, and this somehow was understood, and even understood by at least a majority of the Germans. And we should not forget the NATO double-track decision. Although we have huge demonstrations, Helmut Kohl won the elections. He won the election in March '83 because he deployed this kind of thing. So, and even Helmut Schmidt, they accepted this kind of deterrence. So, I mean, and then I think we should definitely trust the American deterrence, because if we not trust the American deterrence, we should better stop everything. Yeah, and we should get rid of the Bundeswehr and stop everything, because this is of course our life insurance. So this is a bit of a bizarre situation, and I would think, I mean, definitely Putin is not crazy. He has just following a different logic. He's obviously not following a Western logic, and we are really struggling with cultural understanding. And there's very little knowledge on this country. I don't speak Russian, but even in my sphere, my colleagues, there's a very, very limited number of people who are experts in the Russian armed forces. I'm not aware of any kind of civilian outside the German Bundeswehr who's really an expert on Russia, and even in the German intelligence services. It's limited. There are, of course, NATO speakers, etc., doing this, but we haven't reached the level of the Cold War expertise, I would say, yet. So, and therefore, is an outreach that this kind of weird thing, the next step might lead to an all-nuclear war, and I think this is much overdone.
But let me ask Minister Pevkur, is Putin really making a better deterrence, or should I use the word, is threatening us better? Because deterrence is a technical term that I wouldn't be on the same level. Let's come to deterrence later. Is Putin threatening us better than we do? Does he has the military power, or is he threatening us with Potemkinischen villages? So what is he doing from your point of view? You're close by.
For that, we have to understand, the logic behind Putin's thinking, and I totally agree that this is not the logic what we, share. Just a couple of examples of that. So just be clear that when we have a problem, when one soldier is down, then for Putin, that soldier on the battlefield is just a number on paper. So he has no problem to lose 100,000 or 1 million men on the battlefield, because 139 millions will be alive in Russia. So just understand that the body count is not the question. So in that sense, and this is why you asked about the Russian deterrence. Russian deterrence is building narratives based on the fake news. Because what we have to understand that we have the tendency to believe what he says, and doesn't matter is it true or not. He says that I will use nuke. Will he? He knows what will be the consequence, and there will be a consequence, and it has been delivered as a message to him many, many times. So he claims that, and once again I have to refer to our historian. So he claims that Crimea is old Russia. Okay, how far back we go into the history? Ottoman Empire was close to St. Petersburg. So should we say that Turkey and all the allies or people of that neighborhood will go to take Moscow? Because it's ancient Turkish territory. So how far back we go into the history. So you cannot, as a leader of the country, you cannot pick the moment in the history and say that this is the right moment. So Peter I was also in Estonia. So Danish king was in Estonia. Swedish king was in Estonia. Germans were in Estonia. So, good. But we have to look what is the situation after 91 and what is the internationally accepted borders of the countries. And when you don't obey these rules or the countries' borders, then you start to build the narratives. Russia is a mighty country. By the land, by the territory, yes. By the size of economy, no. By the people's wealth, no. And on the other hand, we have to understand that this neighborhood of this region of the globe is extremely survivable. We've been ready to eat only potatoes, to be independent. Just give you an example that 1939, Estonian GDP per capita was higher than my good colleagues' Finnish GDP per capita. 1939. In 50 years during the occupation, Estonian GDP was dropped dramatically. That in 1991, after regaining our independence, the difference in GDP per capita was 17 times. So at the moment it's again 2 times. So in 30 years we're catching Finns again, and soon be over. So, but the point is that that they are building the narratives, they are building the fake news, and sorry to say, they are playing poker all the time with us. And unfortunately, we are not such a good poker players, because we have the tendency to believe or to be afraid of that what happens if he will do that. I was discussing with one general yesterday that how is the behavior of Russians. So you go to the nightclub. I know that we have the open line also in Facebook, but let it be. So you go to the nightclub. You meet with a hostile Russian, and then there will be an argue, and he punches you, and when you say, "Hey, come on, let's talk," he punches you again. But when you punch, yourself, then he says, "Okay, let's talk." So this is the understanding, that we have to take from the Russian behavior. And this is why, exactly, controlling the Baltic Sea, having the deterrence. And the deterrence Russia understands is the footprint on Estonian soil of the allies and credible deterrence. And also the message coming out from the NATO that the regional plans coming out from Sakharov's office in April are so good that when the Kremlin looks at these papers, then he thinks, I will not play poker anymore with NATO.
Thanks. Admiral Rackwitz, before we come to resilience and deterrence and the relation between both, your statement.
Allow me one remark about the narratives, Russian narratives. I usually try to avoid the term, but it has already been mentioned, A2AD, which is part of that narrative, even on operational and tactical terms. Because what happened? Russia is drawing a circular line onto a map and says, I can kill everybody. Within that circular line, I can kill everybody. That is ballistic missiles from Kaliningrad. This is cruise missiles from ships based in Kaliningrad or from St. Petersburg. I can kill everybody there. So even within military circles, the discussion was, we got to leave the Baltic Sea. We have to operate into Russia from outside the Baltic Sea because this is a kill zone. No, it's not. This is the narrative of a kill zone. But even within military circles in the West, it has had some traction. It still has. Those discussions, because those discussions at the same time totally forget that what we were getting at is, well, unless we have already entered into a hot war, there is still all those sea lines of communication to protect. There is the lifelines to the Baltic Seas to protect. So we do not have the luxury of just saying, he threatened to kill us, so we better move out. We don't have that luxury. We have to move in, and we can. And we have been used to do that because until '89, the Baltic Sea was, in fact, a kill zone, so to say. And nevertheless, we still operated there at that time, the Danish and the German fleets, and still operated there. So those narratives are very, very strong. We have to be very careful not to fall in Putin's trap with those things. So I perfectly agree with what the minister said.
Yeah, and the point is that that you can always draw the same lines or the bubbles and say that we control it.
Exactly.
And believe it or not, we have enough assets in NATO to take down these sources of these bubbles from Russian side. Yeah. So it's not like that we have the bubble and we cannot enter this bubble. No, we can. Yes, we can.
But, okay, one comment on that. I think it's very much when you mentioned the narrative, and I think this is if you are so much focused on out-of-area operations, it's obviously that it was this kind of classical warfare was so out of the space, out of the mindset, that even with forbidden planning operations of taking Kaliningrad, because I think it was Klaus Wiegreve who from the Spiegel who said okay, there's a Suwalki gap, but how would the Russians defend Kaliningrad against the Polish and Lithuanian and NATO forces? But it's this kind of fear, a totally new situation, which was so common in the Cold War. But if you are totally concentrated on do reconstruction missions in Afghanistan and Mali, this is a threatening situation. Yeah, and I think this is what we can see also in the planning process of NATO, which was mentioned by the minister, is really that since 2014 and especially 2022, that we are really making progress in getting into the new scenario.
Exactly. Yeah, you're leading perfectly to the last topic I want to discuss with you. And after that, I wanna ask the audience also to ask questions in the last 20-15 minutes. So you can already think about a good question to the wonderful panel. But the last issue I want to address is the two words, resilience and deterrence. For me, both sides of the same coin. If you don't have really resilience, or if you don't have the power, the strength, to stay in your positions for a longer time, to have the troops. Of course, the aggressor knows that there is no real deterrence in the end. So, if you want to have deterrence, if you want to say, no chance, don't even think about it. We can't just talk about narratives. There should be real vessels, there must be real troops, there must be real tanks. Just when they are there, there is a real deterrence. So, and of course you know, because we're on the panel of the Reservist Association, what kind of role plays the reserve in this issue? Do we need the reserve? What do we need? Do we need more vessels? Do we need more fleets of flotillas? What do we need? So you can ask everything. More vessels, more reservists, conscription, everything is allowed now, and I will try to bring it in order then. Minister starts always.
Yes, there was a commercial many years back. There was whatever the American product was, but there was, the point of the commercial was, I like it big. So the point is that, of course, we need everything and more. So, but nevertheless, we all understand also that during the last 30 years, there has been a huge misfinancing of the defense forces. Just to give you the comparison that 40 years back, the average expenditure to defense among NATO countries was about 4% in 1982, 83, 84. The average expenditure of NATO countries from European Union was also above 3.5%. So today we are saying in NATO that we should have 2%. So this should be the floor, not the ceiling. So let's think. At the moment, 30% of the NATO countries fulfill this criteria. 30%. I made a calculation. So when all the countries of NATO will spend 2%, we will have immediately 100 billion more euros to defense. 100 billion in 1 year. So the first answer to the deterrence and the resilience is spend more. And we don't have the luxury, we don't have the time to say that, oh, it's so difficult. It's not. It's a political decision. We made this political decision after Russia invaded Crimea. 2014 and forward, Estonian defense spending is above 2%. After last year, only last year, Estonia made new packages to defense in amount of 1.2 billion euros. And you can take the size of economy of Estonia and then you can have an understanding what that means. So this brings our expenditure this year to 2.8%, next year 3.2%. And my message is very clear that all the countries should have 2.5, not 2. And we don't have any other option because the gap what we have gained in last 30 years is such a big that even 2.5 is actually not enough. Estonia will acquire new anti-vessel missiles with a range of 300 kilometers. We have already, but we will acquire a lot of more sea mines. Our deterrence and resilience on the seabed means anti-vessel missiles and sea mines to control our territorial waters. And of course, we can also use other means from the land component. We are acquiring HIMARS. We are acquiring medium-range air defense. I just today announced that we will buy, I cannot say exact numbers, but for hundreds of millions, loitering munition with a range of 95 kilometers. We can also use them on the sea if necessary. So this is also deterrence and resilience for the seabed. So we are investing a lot. And my message is that when we want to have a very good resilience, when we want to have a very good deterrence, then we have to invest more to defense. So easy it is. And there is no excuse for anyone to say it's too expensive. Sorry, freedom has no price.
So clear statement. I'll come to you, back to you, when the reserve is concerned. But first of all, do we do enough for the resilience to have a real deterrence, also from the point of the German Navy?
Well, regarding GDP expenditure, I only hint at what Minister Pistorius has said yesterday, so I do not have to add anything to this. And let me add, I would like to personally thank the Minister for the investment that Estonia is bringing. For example, what was left out in my COE, there's the help of an Estonian staff officer, a very gifted young man, who is working with us on exactly coastal defense. And I know what kind of investment that is for a small force like Estonians, to send somebody over to Kiel to collaborate with us on that matter. So, are we doing enough? You can never do enough. As the Minister said, there is no price to freedom. Where should we focus? Resilience, I think we have, with the German armed forces, it pretty much is connected to what the professor has said. For the last 25 to 30 years, we have so much focused on a contingent-based armed forces who is sending away limited packages of forces to faraway places to do limited missions in a peace framework. Those times are finished and done. We cannot afford this, not vis-à-vis a competitor, an opponent, as Russia is. So this requires not only defense expenditure, and here we have a big disadvantage as opposed to Estonia, because we are much bigger and therefore much more cumbersome in some places as opposed to Estonia. But we have to steer that vessel around. We have to identify what is the legacy of those 25 years of operations in faraway places, which is actually hindering us in standing up the presence force that we actually need, both at sea and on land. At sea, it is perhaps even less a problem than with the land forces. And I do not do the army's job, so I can focus on what is my turf. Focus should be, we've touched on that before, seabed warfare. What we've seen is we have far too little capacities and actually building up a picture what is actually happening on the ground, on the seabed, in the North Sea, in the Baltic Sea. We have to build up a common operational picture, not only with our friends and allies, but starting with both police and law enforcement in Germany and the military forces. We are far away from where we should be, and able to be resilient, to actually know, to have a picture on which to act. So those would be my first focal areas. And then, of course, material readiness. And there we have to steer around the ship, which is still too slow in actually flexibly responding to the operational demands we have. But I'm seeing us on a good track. Very important for my flotilla, 4,500 people, 30+ ships in the Baltic Sea, is that we now have the understanding on the political level that preparation for wartime operations is more important than on-time contingent delivery somewhere in the world. It's easily said, I know that, especially to the Foreign Office, easily said, hard to be done. But this is a very fundamental thing to do, because otherwise, if we do not have the time to prepare our forces for high-end combat readiness, then we are losing actually the fundamentals of what we're supposed to do. So this has been a very fundamental step, and we've taken it. Now it's the expenditure. It will take a little time, yes, and we do not have any time to spare, but those would be my focal areas.
Thank you very much. Last question before I open the floor. Have we understood our task? If we hear that, can we say we understood what we have to do, what we have to change? Do you think we're on the right track?
I think I'm a bit more pessimistic than my dear colleagues here. I mean, I'm an outsider, and I mean, what we see here also at the MSC is a lot of talking. And we see, we should, we must, we have to. But what is interesting to me is what is done. What is actually done. And we have a lost year, more or less, in Germany. I mean, was a bit of talking, especially in the public, what was really done in terms of reforms. We lost a year. And then, of course, it's Germany, it's not Estonia is at the border. There is an immediate threat. And there's a totally different perception in Estonia than in Germany, obviously. Germany is a divided country in terms of, I mean, we are all agreeing here, this is self-referential, the Munich Security Conference. But that's not Germany in the end. And then, of course, you can see that with the delivery of main combat tanks. So 450 million EU citizens are not able to deliver 2 battalions of main combat tanks, and especially not without the United States. What does this tell you about sovereignty of the European Union? So therefore, seeing this, I'm a bit more pessimistic. And then also on the European level, I mean, in the end, I think it's about to get a major war back, or the option, the possibility, back in the frame of reference of society and the military. The military is doing that since 2014, doctrines, but there are still, elements of peace in this kind of culture of the German armed forces. But they made progress. But in terms of, I think, the politicians, they woke up in 24th of February, but still there's a lot of space to go. If we see that, we all know that the German MOD has to be reformed, it's dysfunctional. We all know that the German armed forces are dysfunctional for many, many reasons. And we hope that Minister Pistorius, and I'm quite optimistic in that, is taking up really actual measures. If we take the European Union or Europe, we all talk about, I mean, joint operations in the Baltic. Yeah, but I mean, we have, how many different types of frigates and corvettes do we have? And do we make progress? That the Dutch are building the frigates, the Germans the tanks, the French the airplanes? I mean, this is a bit simplistic, but do we go in this direction? I don't think so. I don't think so. And Monsieur Macron hasn't announced that France is going to buy a Leopard 3 tank, and this kind of really steps forward. And I would even argue there's not even a strategy on the German side how to make progress in terms of armament on a European base. So again, I'm as a historian always think of the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation, which had the rule of law, very important, against bigger states. So internally the rule of law, but they found no solution against Napoleon. So in the military sense, there was no evolutionary process possible. And what we need is an evolutionary development. And we talk about that since 2000 years, in my feeling. So a long time, also at the MSC, we have to, we should. But if we see what really happens, this is really a problem. And I think that the admirals, the generals in the German armed forces, they want to do something. Oh, most of them at least. They want to do something, but they can't. I mean, they can't. The German Navy has no ammunition. You just can't. You can leave your ports, but you can't fight.
Thank you. Minister, does this bring us back to reality? I wanted to open the floor right now, but this brings us back to reality, right?
I want to fight with you.
That's why I give the floor to you now.
Just very briefly, that coming first to the Minister Pistorius, he just said, in the last panel that, I'm an optimistic person. Look at my face. So I must say the same, by nature, I'm an optimistic person, so I'm not so pessimistic as you. And I must say that, that...
Different roles.
Well, for sure. And we have elections coming, so it's... So, nevertheless, what we have here in Germany, so you have Zeitenwende, you have 100 billions, you have to make wise decisions, and quickly. So you have the money. Come on. Let's spend it. 100 billions. It's a huge amount of money. And now it's important to make these decisions quickly, and to make these decisions. I've always said one thing: you have to have a political leadership. Many years back, when Estonia turned to digital age, we had in 1999 already the possibility to make a tax declaration electronically. So today, 99.9% of the population makes electronic tax declaration. So So we made a decision that we go digital. And you need to keep the political leadership. When you have the political leadership, then everything else will follow. You have to change the law. You need a political leadership. You have to speak to the public. Why we make this? You need to have political leadership. So when you have the political leadership, then things happen. And before we go to the questions regarding the standardization and reducing the number of weapon systems, fully agree. I said in one of my panels the same thing. Well, can you imagine that we have in European armies we have approximately 170 or something like that weapon systems. In US Army they have 34. So this should, put us thinking that we are not so rich. I will not say the name of the company, but there is a weapon manufacturer who says that when you are using my rifle, you can only use this ammunition in order to get the guarantee for the rifle. Come on, it's 55, 56 NATO standard. And you cannot use different type of ammunition. Stupid. Somehow, I see the light in the end of the tunnel. We managed to agree on European level that there will be one mobile charger.
Thank you very much.
So maybe we have the possibility also to reduce the number of weapon systems.
Thank you very much. We have a few minutes for questions from the audience. Do we have questions? Yes, first question here. Can you say your name?
We have to bring the mic because
name, position, and the question.
Michael Beck, Captain Naval Reserve, German Navy, and related on family side to the Baltic states. My father-in-law was coming from Riga, and I have close friends in Tallinn and in the Navy as well of Estonia. So I've just been there a couple of weeks where Operation Albion had took place. So I've been on Saaremaa, Ösel, I've been in Huimaa, and then we went to Narva. And then I talked to the local people and said, what are you really afraid of? And this is a very special, different question. You have a minority of Russian ethnic people in Estonia. And I've seen a lot of them are living around Narva and coming a little bit to Tallinn. Is there a narrative as well, as we have seen it on Crimea, that they should be taken back to Russian people? Maybe? Could we face this?
Well, how much time do we have? I try to be brief. First, of course, we have Russian minority. Also, Germany has Russian minority. Many countries have. Somehow, one of my friends living in LA said that after the war started in Crimea, in full scale in Ukraine, all the Russians living in LA started to be Ukrainians. So they didn't want to be Russians anymore. But the bottom line is that these Russians living in Estonia, they have a clear understanding about the advantages they have. And of course, when the relations were better, then they went to buy goods in Russia from Narva, because it's just, above the bridge, and you go to the store, you can have a milk or bread 2 times cheaper. But they don't want to live there. So they want to live in Estonia because they understand that there is Soviet Union and there is a Western country. So this is the difference. So of course we have, as in many countries, we have a minority of the minorities who is ready to talk about the glorious time of Soviet Union. But most of the people living in Estonia, non-Estonians, doesn't matter, is it Ukrainian, Armenian, Azerbaijanian, Russian, they clearly understand what we have achieved in last 30 years, and I don't see that this is a problem of Estonia today.
Thank you very much. I can see 2 further questions, 3. So I, or 4 questions, and I close, and I collect the 4, so we can make notes. So one after the other, and then we go into one round of answers. Who has a microphone now? Okay, you first. Then we go to the right side from my side.
Hello, my name is Jan Hartung. I'm the chairman of the Academic Association for Security Studies, and I would like to thank you for your great discussion and maybe give you another opportunity to deconstruct the A to HD narrative. And I would like to ask you how, or if there is a re-evaluation of the Russian capabilities to see into the Baltic Sea, and how many holes the red circles maybe have.
Okay, thank you. We touched this already, but maybe it gets in more details now. Let's see. Yes? Who's next?
Hello, my name is George. I'm also a member of the Academic Association for Security Studies. There was a recent report published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies detailing a series of war games analyzing a possible Chinese invasion of Taiwan sometime before the end of this decade. Without going too far into the details of the report, on average, it found that while the United States and its allies, Taiwan and Japan, could defeat an invasion, it would come at an extremely high cost. I'm talking tens of thousands of soldiers lost, multiple aircraft carriers, dozens of warships. It would essentially take the full force of the US military to defeat such an invasion, let alone to deter it from happening in the first place. With such a possible scenario increasingly being warned about by senior US officials, is Europe ready to face a situation by the end of the decade where it would be forced with the indigenous military capacity within Europe and European NATO to defend its eastern borders and deter or defeat a potential Russian attack or invasion of its most vulnerable member states?
Thank you very much. And I think in front of you or rear, as you like.
Thank you. Dr. Tarsilo Singer, my name. I'm a vice head of a regional third biggest group of reservists in Germany. And besides, I'm a member of the Cyber Reserve Forces. So I have a question to Estonia and the German Reserve Forces. As you said, there are the challenges of multi-domain operations, of cyber operations, better integrating information and so on. In Estonia, as far as I understand it, the military and civil cooperation is very intense and you have a very good interaction with the civilian IT capabilities. How are you doing it? And question to Professor Sensburg, how are you planning to get an equivalent result?
Thank you. And last question was somewhere there. Yes.
Hi, my name's Sophie Witte. I'm a sailor of the German Navy turned reserve officer of the Air Force. So my question is as to what extent can we expect to see something like Air Defender 2023 and naval terms. So Air Defender 2023 is about to be held in June 2023. It's going to be the largest deployment of aircraft since NATO's inception. Do we need something like that in terms of naval deterrence? And if not, why not? And if so, why so? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we start with the last question from the end to the first question.
Keeping me on my toes, right?
Why am I looking to you?
Well, in fact, this is actually the easiest one, so to say. Air Defender 2023, big exercise, very important exercise for Air Forces. Navy is actually playing a part, although a minor one, a more, so to say, facilitating role. Do we need, but you have to understand that Air Defender is part of a more strategic outline of exercises. In Germany, what we call Quadriga, which is that big exercise cluster, which is focused on deterrence and defense. And Air Defender is the focal point for the German Armed Forces exercising this year in the air realm. So what do we do on the Navy side? And do we need it? Yes, we do need it, and we have it, actually. So Northern Coasts has become more and more important. We combine Northern Coasts more and more closely with an exercise which is conducted by a yet non-NATO member, which is Sweden, Aurora. And we will do so again this year. We are closely connected to the Swedish in conducting that exercise from the German Navy, and we're closely connected to the Americans, to Sixth Fleet, which is conducting BOLTOPS, which has, I have known BOLTOPS since I'm in the service, so 32 years. And BOLTOPS has changed its code many times. So it has been a very, very high-level warfighting exercise. Then it has become a PFP exercise when the Russians all of a sudden were friends. I do remember I was captain of a submarine when I had to endure Russian helicopters pinging on me because they were friends. And now we're back to warfighting again. And Baltops has become more and more important. Admiral Gilday, Chief of Naval Operations, last year honored us with his personal presence during Baltops, participating in conferences back in Kiel to discuss that. So, short answer, yes, it is highly important, but we're already there. It might not be that much in the public eye, hopefully not in the public ear. I just remember everybody that Air Defender will be in the public ear. Hopefully so, and I'm looking forward to that, hearing much more jets over my house. I'm living right in the ingress roads to Jagel, so I'm longing to hear more jets flying over my house. So you might not see the Navy as much because it is at sea, where it belongs, but there is. Second question, the whole A2ADs. What you have to understand, and this is the part of the narrative that leaves the rest out, is just having an effector, having the missile, which can fly out hundreds of miles, doesn't actually answer the tactical problem, because first you have to have a target. You have to know where the target is, you have to make sure it's the right target, and just shooting out a missile 200 miles into the Baltic Sea and hitting what? Doesn't make much sense. So you always have to understand the full cycle of scouting, command and control, building the picture, and then actually acting on that, bringing an effector to bear. And those are the questions where you actually have to get in. And this is exactly going into the cyber question. We have to acknowledge that the Russians have heavily invested, we've had that before, that the Navy is pretty much unharmed, the Russian Navy, and they have a big potential. And the Russians have heavily invested into long-range, high-velocity effectors, those missiles. This is not just narrative. They really have done that. We have seen that. They do fly those missiles. But that doesn't answer the tactical problem. So what we have to do is, knowing that, we can either say, OK, we have to invest and invent the same kind of missiles, will cost $1 billion and will take time. Or we can ask ourselves, so where do we break the cycle? Either we break the cycle, either or, we break the cycle in how they come up with the target, so how they do build a picture, or how they distribute the picture, which is C2. There we come in with cyber. This is the understanding of multi-domain operations. I would argue I'd rather go and break their cycle than try to replicate what they did in building up the effector. So this is the answer to the holds.
Thank you very much. I'll answer cyber later, but first, Minister.
Yeah, I will just wrap up and a couple of comments. I will skip the A2AD because we had already a good explanation of that. China, Taiwan, very quickly. The war in Ukraine describes also the future of the security environment in the globe, globally and in the world. So that will have an effect also on China-Taiwan relations. Because China will look very closely what will happen, how the Western society will react and act to all this, what is happening in Ukraine. So either they will get more oxygen or they will stand down. So definitely, this is the main reason why we have to help Ukraine, because this is not a Ukraine-Russia war. It's a global war. It's about the rule of law-based world, etc., etc. And also it has an impact to all the other dictatorial regimes. They are looking very closely how the Western society is dealing with Ukraine. Then civil-military cooperation in cyber field. Yes. Just very briefly, that how we handle this. We have Defense League, which is a voluntary organization with 30,000 people, and by the end of this year and beginning of next year, we will have additionally 10,000 reservists linked to that system. That we will have all in all 20,000 combatants in our reserve army, or not in the reserve army, but in our Defense League. This means also that we have defense in the Defense League, Cyber Defense League. So inside of that, we have Cyber Defense League, which means that whenever we need help, then volunteers, IT professionals are linked. We have the pool of people who will come to help us immediately. We have the coordination, and we established that after the first large-scale cyber attack in 2007, what Russia conducted against the free world, against Estonia. So this was the first, starting point, and from that moment on, we have this cooperation among top IT experts of the private sector who are voluntarily also putting their time and efforts to protect the country. And now the exercises. Well, it doesn't matter on what level or what domain we have the exercise. My message is very clear. Exercise as much as you can, because you cannot be a world rally car world champion driving VRC live in computer. So you have to be on field, and this is something we have to. You cannot be 100-meter Olympic champion without going out and running. So you might think that I might think that I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I'm not. So I would have been in the gym for 1 million hours to be like him. So, but nevertheless, this is the point, that you have to be ready, and to be ready, you have to exercise. And to sum up, as I have flight to catch soon, well, for me, fighters in the air are the voices of freedom.
Thank you. So, just a very short, because we are nearly at the end, very short command to especially China, I think.
Yeah.
I knew that. And I'll bring then the information about Cyber Reserve and what we have to do in the association, because there are a lot of possibilities, but we need some documents I'll bring to you directly.
Is Europe ready to defend itself if America is concentrating on the Pacific? I mean, as you realized, I'm more a pessimist in this region. I mean, Europe, of course, it depends on your enemy. Of course, it depends on, we don't know when the war in the Ukraine ends, how Russia comes out, if there will be a new government. This is all we don't know. Are we ready in the foreseeing future to fight a major war? I mean, of course, the German Navy, the German Air Force will fight if this is such a scenario. Are we capable? I am very skeptical. I'm very skeptical. And then of course, you have to see, I mean, even Britain, yeah? I mean, they are very good in talking, and they're also good in the Navy, etc. But the army is in a very sorry state of affair. If you look at Italy, it's, again, a very sorry state of affair. France is able to conduct colonial warfare very unsuccessfully in Mali. If it comes to NATO Eastern Flank, very little. Therefore, it's so important that Germany is going to deliver its heavy division 2025, which will not be fully combat ready by 2025. This is for sure. So, therefore, I think Europe will make progress. Yes. But the big question is, will Europe overcome the problems which they have because of 30 states, of 30 different cultures, etc.? Is there really enough pressure on the pot that they are really understanding we have to prepare? Because otherwise, we are on the problems. I really have my doubts. So yes, there will be progress, but without the United States, I mean, look, the Americans have delivered 2 extra divisions, land forces, to Europe. France has deployed 800 troops to Romania. And this says a lot about Europe. And yes, we will make progress, but I'm very skeptical. Because also the feeling of the Europeans is we were always under the American, umbrella, also in the Cold War. So there's a lot of progress to make. And then we will see how far we can get. How much pressure we can really put on the pot. But I'm a bit skeptical about that.
But I hope that we can have consensus that we have the awareness now.
We at least have, yeah.
Well,
we at least in this room have.
I saw you make marks.
Yeah, I made one mark, but I want to tell that mark after you tell about the reserve and cyber. Do you want to?
Okay, I can do it right now if you still have the time.
Yeah.
Cyber reserve is one real asset in our association, medical and cyber. The problem is right now that we have no clear papers of the demand of the Bundeswehr. General Setzer has to, not you, not you. Bundeswehr, my eyes go to you, sorry.
Submarines, corvettes, naval infantry, but...
Yeah, we can talk about that too. So we need a few papers that really describe the demand of the Bundeswehr. So Colonel Hempel, who is responsible for that, needs this document, and we're working on this documents because we have, as an association, enough money to push the cyber reserve, but we can't use it as long as the Bundeswehr don't describe exactly the demand. So we could do more. We have excellent people there. We have a good connection between the private sector. We have lots of persons who come and want to join Cyber Reserve, but we have not yet a clear defined demand on the Bundeswehr. So the money we have, we can't spend because that part is missing, and we're asking for these documents, and we have to work very fast with General Setzer together to deliver that.
When you have something extra, you can always give them that money to Estonia.
We would listen very much what you are doing since many years.
This is exactly why now the really last comment for 1 minute. First. Regarding again the cyber defense and cyber defense league, that sometimes I had to speak a lot about also Estonian IT capabilities, being vice president of parliament and then also Minister of Justice, Minister of Interior, and then I said all the time that when you want to have a Swedish quality with German accuracy, then come to Estonia. So when you have any kind of problems, just come to us. We will explain what we do. So
thank you very much.
But last,
do you think we can stand one more?
Yes. Last but not least, I will end up our panel, if you allow, with one story, because we all have to make decisions at the end of the day. And as Europeans, I don't want to end up with so skeptical note, as our dear panelist here says that you are too skeptical. So there are two wise men, and one is the one who, or to whom everyone goes to ask that what should we do, and always everyone gets the answer. But to the other one, no one goes, and then the other one thinks that, okay, how I can achieve this, that all these people will come also to me. And then he thinks that when I can prove that he makes a mistake or lies, then everybody starts to come to me. So, and to do that, so I will take the sparrow, put into my hands, and when he says that, and ask that, is this sparrow alive or dead? So when he says that sparrow is alive, I will squeeze the hand, so I will prove that he is dead. And when he says dead, so I will open the hands, so the sparrow flies away. So he takes the sparrow, goes to the other wise man and asks, my dear colleague, is this sparrow in my hands alive or dead? And then this wise man says, my dear friend, this all is in your hands. So the future of Europe, the future of Europe is also in our hands.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everybody. The ones who are in the room here are invited to a small reception. Thank you very much, first of all, to the panelists. We have some little gifts that come from that side.
I've already got that camouflage messenger notepad.
That's wonderful, right?
One thing I've seen last time in my basic training 31 years ago.
Yeah, we still have it in the reserve.
You have to use that for as the land force. So after the climate change, we will not maybe have a sea. So it's.
Minister, we have a little book about 60 years German Reserve Association, and of course a coin of the German Reserve Association.
Thank you very much.
and much more information maybe that can be useful on your journey.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Now I have to fly to catch, so sorry for that.
That's why. So, and we have the same for everybody. Admiral.
Oh, thanks a lot.
And
woohoo.
Professor Neitzel, and you have to catch the flight. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Dankeschön.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you. So, und
Exactly.
Bye-bye. See you. Thank you very much. So, Sie sind alle ganz herzlich eingeladen für einen kleinen Snack, einen kleinen Empfang. Und wir haben natürlich auch noch für die Referenten Blumen. Zumindest bei mir ist das so, das kriegen immer die Personen, die zu Hause die Entbehrung haben, wenn man viel unterwegs ist. Also von daher ganz herzlichen Dank. Bitteschön. Bitteschön, ich mache das jetzt mal so.
Vielen Dank.
So.